Argentina, home to mate, choripan, tango, and Lionel Messi. A spacious nation of cities, farmland, the Andes Mountains. To U.S. Americans, I think it feels like a very faraway place. Even with Argentina winning the World Cup and a worsening economic crisis beginning to make international headlines, I've struggled to make a U.S. audience care about Argentina. Unlike with some of the other Central American countries where I've spent significant time, Argentina seems, to many U.S. Americans, distant and disconnected from us. We don't see Argentina impacting the U.S., and we can't imagine how the U.S. could possibly impact Argentina. Many U.S. Americans may not know that Argentina, not so long ago, was a global powerhouse comparable to the United States. In fact, Argentina, once called the breadbasket of the world, was in the early 20th century one of the wealthiest nations on earth. Buenos Aires, at one point, was the richest city in the Americas. Economist and historian Julian Zicari later told me that the United States itself once saw Argentina as a strong rival. They were the two great powers emerging from America, the North and the South. And the question was, who was going to control the continent? Even as late as 1945, Argentina had the highest per capita income on the continent and the largest middle class. But by the time I arrived in late 2021, such facts felt like a dream. The first time I met with my new landlord, he referred to Argentina as a third world country. The phrase shocked me because some parts of Buenos Aires seemed so nice. But there was evidence of another side, too. Opulent architecture in a state of disrepair. Cartoneros collecting cardboard from trash cans to sell in order to survive. Mass protests demanding living wages. Headlines that declared 40% of the population in poverty and 15% of kids over the age of 5 working. When I moved here, I knew Argentina was suffering a collapsing economy. But when U.S. news outlets wrote about Argentina's economic troubles, they were typically explained away as the result of a limited economic model, a bloated social safety net, governing ineptitude, and specifically a penchant for printing money. What was almost never talked about in the U.S. was the legacy of 70 years of our own economic interference here. But in Argentina, I heard about it a lot.
Estados Unidos, por suerte para Argentina, estaba muy lejos. Entonces, durante bastante tiempo hubo pocas relaciones.
The very first interview I did in Argentina was with Gerardo Echeverri, a lawyer for the Argentine League for Human Rights. He told me that Argentina, far away at the bottom of the continent, was lucky to avoid U.S. intervention for a long time. But in 1955, a violent chapter ushered in a new era of U.S. meddling in Argentina, an influence that would never leave.
Después del 55 y hasta hoy, es imposible analizar la historia argentina.
From then until today, it is impossible to analyze Argentine history without analyzing U.S. control over Argentina.
Es muy difícil pensar en cualquier.
It is very difficult to think of anything in Argentina where the U.S. is not present in one way or another.
Prácticamente imposible.
It is practically impossible. In the laws, where U.S. precedents are used by a judiciary highly connected with the U.S. In politics, where the U.S., involved with at least 3 coups d'etats, has antagonized nationalization efforts and rewarded leaders who align with U.S. finance. in the currency, where U.S. dollars dictate local prices and accelerate the peso's descent, in the economic structure, where the U.S. has a long record of working to regress Argentina away from industry and towards the limiting model of exporting raw material, and in budgetary policy, which is currently largely controlled by the IMF. What I thought was the story of U.S. involvement in Argentina, vital support for a genocidal dictatorship in the 70s and 80s, was merely one chapter. And as macabre as that was, the effects of U.S. interference since have arguably been even darker. While the roots of the worsening economic crisis are complicated and the result of many factors, what I didn't understand when I arrived was that many of the circumstances that perpetuate Argentina's ongoing troubles, a reliance on commodity exports, an unpayable debt, widespread distrust in the banking system, and a dollar dependence that strangles the peso, were conditioned, at least in part, by the U.S. This isn't a story confined to the past, a sociologist named Gloria Gravina told me. The influence of the United States is permanent in our lives. It is constantly affecting us. They have an intervention in reality. While U.S. citizens may not know much about Argentina, a place seemingly foreign and distant to us, Argentines recognize the U.S. in so much of everything around them. The difference is the viewpoint. After decades of containment policies, we've forgotten Argentina was ever a contender for competition. Unlike Argentines, we never stop to think of what could have been. This is a story about two nations intertwined. One which doesn't know it, and one which has been so marked by that relationship that it would be impossible to overlook. In Chapter 2, how this U.S. Argentina history began.